Welcome to Mortgage Connection. I'm here today with Arie from Romspen. He's in the origination part of the company. Welcome, Arie. Great to have you here.
Hello, David.
Romspen is an amazing lender. They've been operating out of Toronto for about 47 years, and they have over $1 billion invested in mortgages. They were syndicating mortgages for many years up until 2006, at which time they started this investment fund, which is generating amazing returns, over 10% annually for people who've been in the fund for the last 10 years. So very successful organization. We're here to talk to Arie about the different types of loans that the company offers, and also some of the things you should know about borrowing money and how, as a real estate investor, you can work with a lender like Romspen. So thanks again for coming in, Arie. Please tell me about the types of loans that Romspen does. I mean, why would anybody, first of all, come to you guys as opposed to just going to their bank?
Okay, thanks for having me on the show, David. The reasons for using a private lender are really out of speed, efficiency, the ability to have a personal catered loan that fits your needs and is delivered in a timely fashion. Many of our borrowers come to us at the point where they've had it. You know, they've been working with banks for however long, and now they're on their way to either growing their capabilities or growing their portfolio at a much faster growth. And it requires a lender that is nimble, flexible, and really listens to their needs. You know, and in many cases, we've been able to originate loans in 3 to 6 weeks, which is considerably faster than any conventional bank. And so I think borrowers are at first apprehensive because they get scared by the rates, or the rates are considerably higher than a conventional bank. And even within private lending, you have different tiers of rates, and the higher you go, the higher the risk. And but on the other hand, and the flip side is once you get used to that kind of work environment, or that kind of works process, whereby you can get your money quicker and you can get your project done faster, that gets you that much closer to conventional financing, which is where ultimately everybody wants to go. Everybody wants to stabilize their project, get banks to take out their private loans, and then get their investors their return as soon as possible.
Okay, so I mean, we can talk about the rates themselves a little bit later, but first, can you tell us about the types of loans that you do? What kind of projects are we talking about?
Okay, I mean, projects range. The first project I brought to Romspen was actually an entrepreneur who didn't wait for anybody. He had identified a building, a warehouse building, about 80,000 square feet. He had a bit of a track record, I would say a long track record in hospitality, specifically in youth hostels. And they saw this building as an opportunity to create the biggest youth hostel, I would say, in the world, if not the U.S. And so this project required a lot of tracking a lot of the work that he had done up to that point. And because he was a gung-ho cowboy who said, I'm going to do this hell or high water, he had actually started construction well before he closed on the building. So the owner of the building allowed him to get his construction crews in. And as he was seeking financing, he said, I'm going to finance this myself. I have my own schedule. And then when I get my loan, I'll just pay myself back. And so for us, it was a bit of a challenge, but we were able to finance him for about a $17 million loan to build one of the world's largest hostels. And it in turn allowed him to give him the flexibility to build the project in a timely fashion.
Wow. So that's a pretty awesome loan. And now you mentioned that this is in the U.S. So we should say that you're not only, well, the company doesn't only loan in Canada, but also in the U.S.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, I think as the credit crisis started to take effect, some of our borrowers, I should say, or borrowers and investors started looking at the U.S. as a growth market and investing in the U.S. And they came to us and said, this is what I'm buying. It's south of the border. I'm probably not going to be able to get local financing because of liquidity issues in the debt markets. Why don't you back me up on this, and then I'll stabilize the project. And so our first foray was into Illinois, Chicago area. And since then, as it grown, we've done considerable concentration in New York, New Jersey area, an area that I focused on. We've also done work in California, Texas, Florida, Ohio, and Colorado. And to answer your question again regarding the types of projects we do, generally the broad statement is projects which banks shy away from. Now that could be a conventional financing situation whereby the borrower has tremendous pressure from either liens on his property, partners that are leaning up against him. That makes the deal a little bit more hairier,
right,
for a bank, and so he needs to pay these off in a timely fashion, and a bridge loan would allow him to get past that stage. We've done loans such as golf courses, resorts. One of Canada's largest resort called Revelstoke in British Columbia. We've done hotels. We've done buy-sell agreements between partners. We've done dip loans for receivers, court-ordered dip loans. We've done a lot of land development. Particularly, a good case in point was right after Hurricane Sandy. Many of the towns along the Jersey Shore were decimated by the strong winds and the hurricane. That there was a real demand for housing, and brokers started contacting us and saying, we have landowners that have ready-to-go projects. They've been working on entitlements for 5 or 6 years, and they feel that now's the time is right to start building their projects. And one project in mind needed some infrastructure work, so the infrastructure type loan is considered a bridge loan. And I think in those cases, going to a bank would take too long. Going to investors would be probably expensive. So some people look at us and say, okay, you provide us a cheaper form of equity and allow us to get our project going.
Okay, and infrastructure, for people who don't know, are the soft costs in a typical development, including roads and what else?
Yeah,
marketing,
utilities, roads, permitting, all of the architectural work, zoning, much of the work that has to be done kind of behind the scenes, and plus work on the ground that gets you to the point where other types of real estate professionals can start looking at your project a little bit more with a candid eye. And in the case of land development, it's very critical for a landowner to get all his ducks in a row and understand who his end users are. Am I going to build it myself and sell it to the homeowner or the family that's going to move into it, or am I going to work with the builders in the area, be it public builders like we have, or be it private builders that are perhaps more local? And every builder every builder has their own set of requirements, and it's those requirements that add up into the cost basis. And many developers are simply not prepared. So that's when they kind of look at their balance sheet and say, okay, I've spent X amount of time buying the land, finding the land, going to the various forms of government, pricing out the infrastructure work, what else do I need to do to get this to a marketable stage? And I think a bridge loan is critical at that point.
Okay. And what are the typical loan sizes?
Typical loan sizes for us as a private lender is $5 to $20 million. We have done loans as low as $3 million, but nothing less than that. And we've done loans higher, in the 40, 60, 80, even up as high as 100.
Okay.
We look at the strength of borrower. We look at who the person is, what their story is, what has occurred up until that point. We ask very, very hard questions, simply to get to a state of full disclosure.
Right.
And I think many brokers have approached us, and the ones that are successful are the ones that have a concise, clear picture, that have an executive summary that shows that they've done enough of the work to answer some of our underwriting question marks.
Right. What advice would you have for people who are coming to you for a loan? I mean, what are some of the key ingredients that make a loan application successful versus not?
I think it ultimately comes down to expectations, being professional. Whether a broker approaches us or a borrower approaches us, not to be too pushy, not to go, everybody wants to know, like, how long is it going to take, what's the process involved, but that doesn't really answer your question. I think what's critical is the interaction with your lender.
Right.
How are you interfacing with the lender? Are you being helpful? Are you showing full disclosure? Are you thinking ahead of the box? Are you thinking ahead of the curve? Meaning, if there's a question, what other questions can come up?
Right.
Everybody wants to get things done yesterday, and when you see the behind-the-scenes work of what a lender has to do, it's really as Warren Buffett says, it's like a relative strength, So it's like you're getting all these, you're flooded with requests. You may have 30 requests. Your colleague has 30 requests. Every week in our deal meeting, we may have, 100 different deals that we're looking at.
Right.
And as a credit committee, however horizontal it is, when it comes to decision making, they're ultimately going to look at the loan request and try to weigh it against the others.
Right.
And who are you up against? And so sometimes when you're appear to be too desperate or too confident, and you're not making the originations department, if you're not talking to your lender in a way that makes them comfortable, I think he'd rather move on to the next deal.
Right.
And so that's when you have to sort of use the chemistry, build up the chemistry between you and the lender, to the point where, if it doesn't happen this week, it's not a big deal. It's not personal.
Right.
This week, I've been under a lot of pressure to close a couple of critical deals. Next week, things may change, and the money's always there. It's all a question of timing and priorities.
Right. Right. Arie, the reality is that people sometimes get into things, and sometimes things don't always work out the way they expected. Can you give people some advice on what are some of the pitfalls to watch out for, how to ensure that your project is going to be successful?
Well, I don't profess to be an expert, but I could say that developers are human, and they tend to be more entrepreneurial than the best of us. They take on a lot of risk. And that means sometimes being too scattered. It means not having your financial house in order. Every transaction incurs risk, and it means you're taking on new investors, new partners. You may bring on old partners, but every deal has its own financial structure and liabilities. And I think when you're I think when we look at loans, if a developer or borrower comes to us and says, this is what I need to get done, a lot of times we want to look at the overall picture. What is the 30,000 square foot view of what's going on? He may be fixated on this one particular project, but in hindsight, he has to look at all his other projects in retrospect. And say,
He meaning the borrower.
the borrower, right.
Okay.
So what has he learned from his other projects? And what other projects are outstanding, meaning they're open items? There might be other partners that are looking for their return on investment, various forms of government placing liens, contractor liens, various types of liabilities that are sort of weighing him down. And even though he may not admit to it, by taking care of those liabilities, it makes his current project or his most prioritized project that much more smoother.
Okay, so sometimes there could be other debts, and this may be an opportunity to actually consolidate to alleviate some of the pressure, would you say?
Yeah, cleaning house is very important. And the flip side of that is that somebody who is too much of a renegade and says, I don't want partners, I don't want investors, I'm going to do it all myself. A borrower came to us and said he was building an office building and had all the right tenant mix, and unfortunately I don't think when it came down to execution he was able to build a fine looking building. He didn't have the right leasing capabilities or the right type of marketing ability that would allow him to execute. And so it caused him to default on our loan, and that got into the workout department, and this was a borrower that probably should have reached out for more resources.
Right.
What else do I need to get my project back on track, or to even plan ahead and see what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths,
Right.
How do I shore up my financial position.
So knowing your strengths and weaknesses and not being afraid to get help in the areas that you need help, whether it's having partners or sales and marketing team to handle certain things or whatever it would be, get the help that you need.
That's
Yes?
correct.
Okay, all right. Well, Arie, thank you so much for being here today and talking to us on Mortgage Connection. Appreciate it. It was great having you here. And thank you very much for watching. I'm David Grossman. See you next time.